How to start? I guess it was in 2001. So we started the company, and I started working on this in 1982, and Tom and I got together in '83, and that's really the beginning of the company. But in 2001, we'd had 20 products we'd brought out. Most had failed, and a few had succeeded. Fortunately, the first one, Quicken, ultimately succeeded, or I wouldn't be sitting up here at the moment. But I decided to figure out what separated the winners from the losers. So what was odd was a lot of the normal explanations for why a product might succeed or not were true of both the successful products and our failed ones. We had the same people who'd worked on the successful products. A lot of them worked on the failed ones too. Brand, we put the Quicken brand and QuickBooks brand on lots of things that flopped. Customer, well, we sold them to the same customer. A lot of the things that I thought might explain the winners and why they were different from the failures weren't different. The pattern that emerged, and maybe it was, I don't know, cognitive bias, I don't know why, but the pattern that I saw was the winners, something was true of all of them. They were at the intersection of three circles, a Venn diagram with three circles. The businesses that became huge for us had somehow found a giant unsolved customer problem. So a giant problem in the customer's mind, a pain point, and unsolved. If somebody's already solved it, well, let Microsoft go do that. And then it was a problem of the type that we could solve. There are some problems, like I'd love to have shoes that could fly me over the traffic of San Francisco, but our tech team just hasn't gotten the flaws out of that one yet. Some problems are not solvable. It's got to be a problem of the type that we, with all the things you could find in the world around us, could solve. And there's third circle is where you can believe you can build durable competitive advantage. Because I'll admit we were lucky in the early days. The competitors we were going against were slow and just didn't observe what was happening, so they didn't copy us. But we can't assume today that that the whole world will not copy what we're doing. We're all now in a world where it's so easy to make startups happen. It's so easy to put things up online and build apps that you got to assume anything you do will be copied. If not by a bunch of startups, by a bunch of big guys. So if you don't have some source of durable competitive advantage, and not just temporary advantage, you don't want to get in a horse race. And our winners tended to be in that intersection. And our losers failed on at least one of those three circles. In fact, one of our biggest losers failed on all three. And so I think it starts with what, a lot of the themes that you've been talking about today is understand that customer and their problems so deeply. And it's not what you think it should be. It's only what they believe it is. We've lost a lot of money on stuff that we thought people should have. Now, how do you do that? There's a bunch of ways, but I think it's pretty important. And just like we heard about coffee shops, is go there and live with them, sit next to them, follow them around, observe with your eyes. We don't use surveys. Well, we do in marketing, but we in important stuff in product, we don't do surveys. You want to be face to face. You want to see them. You want to feel the pain. You want to hear it. You want to see their bodies. You want to see what they do. Don't trust what they tell you they're doing. And so it really starts being out with the customer you're interested in, watching them live their part of the life that you have an interest in, and then from that, looking for surprise. What was unexpected? The learning comes from the things you didn't expect. And a lot of our biggest businesses came from surprises, things we never expected, that finally, when we savored the surprise, turned into a giant business. QuickBooks, for example.
And just the surprises, just if I touch on that for a minute, what is the sort of data, kind of like either sort of quantitative or qualitative, you're collecting must be enormous. Like, how do you filter out the kind of the needle in the haystack, the nugget, the unexpected surprises? What is there a kind of framework or methodology you use which to try and kind of surface the real magic that you're finding?
Yeah, there is. The first thing to realize is that the human brain is not set up to see surprises. particularly in a social context, like in a business, there's a thing called cognitive bias. You're programmed to see only what you expect to see. They've done tests of this. They've taken people on the left and the right in the political spectrum, and they show them a news story related to the political issue. Both sides will read the same news story and come away more convinced of their point of view. They pull from it selectively. And that's the way we're set up. And if the companies declare they're doing X, everyone's going to believe you're doing X, and you're going to go look for X. So you've got to find a way to trick the mind, and particularly bosses and managers. They're even more committed to the status quo. And they're even less able to. So one thing we do, for example, we just rolled QuickBooks into Mexico. And right now, the team is there about 5 weeks in, and they're on a mission. They're going to sit down, they're going to go and do follow me homes, which is our word for observational studies. They're going to sit next to a bunch of the users, and they're just going to watch. And they're going to take notes of what do they see, especially what was unexpected or didn't make sense. And then they're going to come back, and the leader's going to sit and put them all in a circle and say, okay, what was unexpected that you saw? Because if you don't say that, people will come back with all the things they expected to see, and you'll convince yourself of what you already believed. The learning is what you didn't know. So you have to probe deeply. What was unexpected? When I do this with a team, I keep repeating what was unexpected, or what just didn't make sense, or what was surprising. And just keep pulling out, okay, tell me more about that. What'd you see? What'd you see? And afterwards, when you talk to them and ask them why they did that, what did you hear? And anyone else see that? Who else saw that? You're just trying to coax the surprises out to be discussed, to get beyond the the comforting cognitive bias that we all understand that. Another approach to do it is when you run experiments, whenever you run an experiment, every member of the team running the experiment has to put a numeric hypothesis down. So you have some quantitative variable that you're measuring in the experiment. Everyone has to make their prediction of what it will be. And then you run the experiment, and then everyone has to compare actual to their going-in numeric hypothesis. Learning happens when you understand the difference. Why did the number we got differ from what I expected? That's where the opportunity for learning is. And also the opportunity for surprise. If you don't do that, if people don't have to write anything down, then whatever the number is, too many people will say, well, that's what I expected. Yeah. And we've all seen that. So you want to force people to the shock of surprise that their guess didn't turn out to be true. And then ask everyone, okay, why? Why? What was it? What did we learn? Why was the result different? What do we now know about customer behavior or the performance of our technology that was different than we thought going in?
So you touched a little bit just earlier about brand and building brand, and just, I want to talk for a little bit about or get your perspectives about building brand within the SMB space. It's that we speak to a lot of early stage entrepreneurs which are extremely focused on their CAC or LTV and focus on kind of utility and investing heavily in sales teams, but they don't necessarily think about brand in a thoughtful way. Can you share just your perspective about when might be the right time to invest in brand, and how kind of Intuit thinks about brand within the SMB space and its importance?
Let me just tease out when's the time to invest in brand and separate that from when's the time to build your brand. The time to build your brand is from day one, from the moment the first customer touches you.
And just why is that so critical?
That's all you got. I mean, let's think about it this way. There's and the reason I differentiated the two is there is an industry called the branding industry. So you can hire branding consultants, branding agencies, and they'll sell you about branding. And that generally means getting a pretty logo and a nice color scheme, and then running lots of ads. That you build a brand in this theory by advertising. Now, I don't know, I'll divide the world into practical products that do useful things, like what most of us make, and image products, beer, liquor, wine, cigarettes, fashion. I don't understand that end of the world, okay? So in the end of the world that I work in, practical products that do useful things. Let me just ask you, we'll do a little customer experiment here. We'll ask you how you go about finding and starting to use practical things. So how many of you use GitHub? Raise your hand. Okay, did you start using that because of GitHub's advertising or because of word of mouth from a friend or an article you read? How many was GitHub's advertising? Zilcho. Okay, how many use Lyft? Raise your hand. Okay, did you start using Lyft because of Lyft's advertising or because of word of mouth from a friend or a news article? How many was Lyft's advertising? One. You know, you can go down the list, you can do it with your team. And in general, the practical products we buy and use today, you start buying because of word of mouth from a friend or possibly a article or a blog post or something, which are forms of word of mouth, extended word of mouth. It's just not in the world today where people buy important practical products for the first time through advertising. So I don't think advertising builds brands. What builds brands is what we just heard, these fanatical customers who will tell their friends. People who rate you 9 and 10 on a Net Promoter Score. Those are the guys who are going to tell their friends. Also the people who rate you 0 through 5. They're going to tell their friends too. And so a brand is not what we say it is. It's not our words. A brand is what a friend tells their friend about you. That's your brand. And you build that from day one. You build it with product and service. And then if your business is a network effect or a contribution system, you build it by participation. How many people participate? It's that simple. You build it through your product, through service, and if you're a contribution system, through getting participation and their contribution. You don't build it through advertising. Now, maybe if you sell deodorant, you build it through advertising, but or liquor, cigarettes, etc. But
but product and service, they're in an incredibly crowded and incredibly competitive space. Is that enough? Like, you speak to many companies that they may have the best product or service, but they're just getting going. And when you've got Intuit with a kind of massive distribution platform, is there any advice you give early stage companies that beyond just product and service, how do you build that kind of massive brand or early customer adoption in a way that can help them to scale?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to build it from day one is to start with, actually what the last speaker talked about. Find that painful problem that's so painful and unsolved, and then solve it for them. Nothing's more certain to create fanatical word of mouth than taking a great pain out of their life. And if the pain's not big enough or the solution isn't good enough, you're not going to get the word of mouth and you won't get liftoff, no matter how much marketing dollars you throw at it. And you build that from day one. I mean, we had no money when we were getting going. We did not get venture capital. We failed. This was in 1984 when we tried to get venture capital. And so we didn't have any money, and we almost went under. The only thing that saved us was we got a few customers by working through banks, and they started telling their friends, and they started telling their friends. And the business just started turning up. When we launched QuickBooks, we did put advertising out because we had the money at the time we did QuickBooks in 1992, but the ads were total failures. Total failures. We ran a 2-page ad in the world's largest trade journal, PC Magazine. Full page, full color, 2 pages. 800 number at the bottom. We got 4 phone calls. Now, I'm convinced if we'd run 2 blank pages with an 800 number, we would have gotten more people calling the 800 number. So the ad was terrible. It literally drove people away. And so we cut the ad. And we had massive bugs with QuickBooks. Oh, huge bugs. And it wasn't much of a problem. You'd just be typing all of your business data, and then sometime 4, 6, 8 weeks later, poof. It was all gone. Totally gone. That's what we launched QuickBooks with. And then that caused huge service problems because, you staff your customer service lines for the expected number of volume of calls. You don't staff for everyone calling in screaming mad, where the bleep is my data? So our service, you couldn't get through. So, plus we launched the product at twice the price of the leading rivals and the then existing accounting products. And we launched it with a new brand name, QuickBooks, with a confusing message. The alternative, it was the first accounting software with no accounting in it. So, I mean,
That's a great. Sounds
You
great.
could, this is a really great
You
product
hired some
launch.
marketing people to do that.
Yeah, we aced this one. Oh no, you would love the magazine ad. The biggest thing was a giant picture of a bald-headed woman. There was a family on pogo sticks. There were bombs dropping, pictures of bombs dropping. Now, the ad agency said, look, accounting is so dull, no one will pay attention to an accounting ad. So we're going to use a technique called borrowed interest. So you put up other things unrelated to your product that people might look at. If you ever work with an ad agency and they talk to you about borrowed interest, fire the ad agency. So literally 4 calls in 1 million readers. So that was the great launch of QuickBooks in 1992. Now, what happened? We launched in March. By the end of April, at the time there was great market share tracking because all software was sold in boxes through stores. And that had a lot of problems with it, but one great thing was all the stores reported their sales. So we had absolutely perfect market share numbers. At the end of the second month in the market, QuickBooks became the best-selling accounting software in the country, selling twice the number of units as any other competitor. That's at the end of month 2. So it wasn't the great marketing, because there wasn't any. It certainly wasn't the bug-free product. It wasn't the price. We were at twice the price of the market leader. It was one simple thing. The biggest problem in trying to run your books, every business has to run books, keep track of stuff for taxes. The biggest problem was all accounting software used accounting, debits and credits, journals and ledgers, posting and closes. Well, we'll do the survey here. How many of you took accounting in school? Raise your hand if you took accounting in school. Keep your hand up if you love accounting, you're confident, you think it's great, you really understand it. Okay, good. I think there's 1 guy, 2 people here. That's great. Thank you. We always need those 2. Our finance team is hiring. The rest of you, though, who put your hands down, you're what's called normal. You don't understand debits and credits, posting ledgers. You think closing is what you do with doors. And General Ledger must have been a World War II hero. So we were the first people to launch a business accounting product with none of that in it. No double entry accounting. If you see, you just see a check on the screen, you fill it out, we do all the hocus pocus. You see an invoice, you fill it out. It's in plain English for civilians. That solved the number 1 problem when it came to the small businesses and the whole how do I keep books, was just putting it in English instead of accounting. And that's why we became the market leader in 2 months, despite having every big screw up you could imagine.
The importance of language.
More than language was the whole concept.
Sure.
Debit and credit accounting brings with it all sorts of things like, if you go back and look and there's an error, well, if you go back in a document or spreadsheet and you see an error, what do? You erase it and you start over. Or you just change that one thing. You can't do that in accounting. They won't let you change anything. So it's the whole mentality had to be dynamited and started over.
So I have a couple more questions, and then we'll open up to the audience. So Intuit today is seen very much as a platform, and a lot of founders in the audience aspire to be a platform in their businesses. And I'm curious, as you think about the kind of evolution of Intuit and the products, how that transition from product to platform, or the mistakes that founders make as they think about this evolution. Any advice you'd give them in that aspiration long term to be a platform?
Yeah, there's probably a lot of good points of view on this. I think we could get a lot sharper on it, but I think job 1 is to make an amazing product that gets very popular. People aren't going to want to build your technology in. If you've got shitty maps, no one's going to want to build your maps into their software. So I think job 1 is make something that people really want. And then job 2 is figure out the needs of your platform community. If it's a developer community, understand how your stuff will help make them money and sell lots of product, because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make great product and sell lots of it. So you got to understand them cold as a customer. If you're a platform for financial institutions or someone else, you really got to understand their problems and solve their problems. So, then you move from having 1 customer, in our case, small businesses, to having 2 customers. In fact, we have 2 small businesses and accountants. And the accountants use it in a very different way. I'm surprised we ever had accountants as users, but by God we do. And so we've got to serve their needs, which are quite different than serving the small business needs. Now, our success there started because we had something that small businesses, now millions of them use, so accountants then started to use it. But now in serving the accountants, you got to understand they have a different world than a business who's keeping books for just their own company. So those are the principles that I've learned.
So, as everyone knows, you founded Intuit, and then, and then Intuit today is 9,000 employees, $60 billion market cap. A new CEO announced not that long ago, and it's as I think the sort of Intuit community has touched so many different companies, and it's one of the more remarkable things from the outside is your ability to stay hyper engaged as a founder, while also recruiting exceptional CEOs to run and scale the business. There's a lot of founders in the audience, like how, and that partnership seems to have been incredibly effective. Any advice or lessons learned through that experience of staying engaged as a founder while bringing an exceptional leadership team that you could share with the audience?
Well, on your question, the partnership between me and our CEOs, is that working well? I'd make sure you ask them the question, because it's in a sense the company's haunted by the founder who won't go away. But to the, well, I guess it, how's it worked? It's a little different with each CEO. Each CEO is different. It started because I was the CEO for the first 11 years, and the company was growing so fast. We had just acquired Chipsoft, a company in San Diego, the makers of TurboTax, and so that was a company almost our size. So now the management difficulty had just gone way up because it wasn't just one site. It wasn't just people I had hired and trained. There now was a whole other operation, almost our size, in San Diego. And I just decided I was holding the company back. That my skill sets were in some areas, but I had some significant outages in other areas. And those other areas were becoming much more important to the company. And after all the hell we'd been through in the early years, because we almost went under and almost didn't survive, I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't the guy holding the company back. So I decided to find a guy or gal who was a complement to me. It had all the strengths that I didn't have, so that we were not hostage to my weaknesses. And so I hired Bill Campbell, phenomenal individual, very different from me, a set of skills like I've almost never seen in any human. And thank God I did. God, it was the best thing. The company grew and succeeded because Bill was running it and I wasn't. Now we brought different skills. Bill, it varies by CEO, but Bill had no interest in talking to the press. None, zero, zip. So I kept doing all of that. Bill didn't want to talk to investors, so I did all of that. In 2000, we hired a CEO Bill and I did to replace him, a guy who came from GE. There wasn't a press person he didn't want to talk to. So I switched to working on product a lot more because he was not as facile in product. So a lot of it is to be a complement and work, allow the CEO strengths to shine. Another thing that's important is to be clear that there's only one CEO. And after the first 11 years, that was not me. So the buck stops with him. And everyone has to know that, and I have to make sure that works. And I think another piece, I see this on boards, so I've been on some boards, and I give a lot of advice to folks who are considering growing their board or creating a board or how do I be a great board member. I was a lot less successful as a board member when I would charge into the board meeting with my ideas. Yeah, they were great ideas, I can guarantee you. But they weren't the CEO's ideas, and they may not have been responsive to what was on the CEO's mind. I'm much more effective now, and I learned this, developed this inside the company, but I now use it when I'm on a board, is starting when I meet with a product team or I meet with the CEO, asking, so what's the biggest issue on your mind? How could this meeting be most helpful to you? If they need more, usually they'll have that figured out, but if they need more prompting, like if it's a team setting, I ask, well, on what thing or things are you less than 100% confident? And I'm just trying to get them to tell me where they want help. Because if I can help where the CEO wants help, the odds of that being successful are so much higher, and the odds of it getting implemented are infinitely higher than on something the CEO doesn't think is broken. So, yeah, that's a thing I'd recommend to all. When you, I just did training with some of our leaders on how to be coaches for product teams, and so we took a video of me coaching a team and showed the first 19 minutes, and then we stopped it, and we had the 14 people in the room. I asked them all, okay, what would you do at this point? Okay, you're running the meeting with the product team. What are you going to do in the next segment of the meeting? So write down the area you're going to focus on. What's your objective? And how? What words will you use or what deeds will you do to try to achieve your objective with the product? So they worked for 5 minutes, wrote that down, and then we had a bunch of the team members write up on the board. I wrote up, tell me what area are you going to focus on? What's your objective? What's your house? We put them all up. We'll put them up for 6 of the people. And then we hit the other folks in the audience. I asked them, now look across those 6 coaching plans. And what are your observations? What are your patterns? And one of the people observed, none of the 6 had asked the team where they need help or where they want help. And in looking at the videotape, I failed to do that as well. Even though I've been teaching that principle for 5 years, I looked at the tape, I didn't do it.